Writer-director Coralie Fargeat brings us The Substance, a 2024 sci-fi body horror movie. Now, I should say I knew nothing about this movie. It may surprise you to know I don't really read news on movies and things like that. I don't generally watch trailers, so I had no idea what this movie was about. I'd heard of it and I'd seen the poster, and I thought it was like a thriller about someone taking like an Ozempic style drug, and that's kind of what it was. And I was like, not interested. But a couple of people have asked me about it, so I thought I would give it a watch. So the director's previous work is Revenge, which I haven't seen, to be fair. And this story is apparently based on Dorian Gray, or at least partially. And it's a science fiction body horror movie. It's very akin to the works of Cronenberg, which I'm sure I'm not the first person to say that. And is a body horror movie in a kind of heightened reality that is really messaging about beauty standards, about celebrity, about addiction, and about self-obsession. So what's the story? Demi Moore plays an aging actress who, because of her getting older, has fallen out of the limelight somewhat and is being disregarded. And there's often commentary within Hollywood that older actresses are kind of somewhat put out to pasture, with a few exceptions. And she is not happy about it, and she takes this black market drug called The Substance, which promises to solve all her problems. And how it does this is you kind of give birth, so to speak, to a younger version of yourself. And the idea being that you oscillate between the original or the Matrix version of yourself and the new version every 7 days. And while one is active, the other's kind of in a comatose state, kind of eating intravenously and things. And that all seems great, except that vanity, obsession gets in the way. Things ultimately go wrong. Rules are broken. And a whole lot of body horror takes place. So what do we think about it? So this was, having now watched it, this seems to be a quite highly regarded movie in many ways. And I think this movie is going to be lauded for being, an original movie in many ways. And, I can kind of see where that kind of plaudit comes from. Let me go into a little bit more detail about what I liked about it. So let's talk about the technical elements first of all. So one thing that struck me with this film is, and I'll start off with the sound design, because I've never noticed the sound design more than this movie. From the kind of, just the sort of the sloshings about when someone's eating, little kind of wrinkles and things like that. The over-exaggerated sort of sound design here, I think, really adds to the movie's hyper-reality and kind of grossness overall. It's very well done, but there are other technical elements. The kind of hyper-reality that is given to us through the direction, the camera work, these kind of weird angles, the sometimes long kind of segments without kind of speaking. And it feels like almost a TV version, a TV world that you're watching in some aspects. Everything is somewhat exaggerated. The world doesn't seem kind of real. And I kind of think this benefits the movie in some logic issues. I do think there's a few logic issues here, but it's in this kind of weird sort of reality. But it's very stylistic. I think the movie is shot incredibly well. As I said, the sound design's good. The music is excellent. I thought the score was very good. And then the actual performances, you know, Demi Moore, she's not on screen loads these days, but I think she does a solid job of being a, you know, a movie star who is in mental decline, and she's suffering because of the inevitability of getting older, and how to try and, you know, have these standards of beauty being kind of forced upon you as really as a woman, I suppose, and certainly in the context of this film, and you know what you need to do to achieve it, and how you're ultimately shown the door if you can't achieve it, and everyone is always willing to replace you with a younger version of you. So I thought there was you really got that performance from Demi Moore. And I think obviously the social messaging in this movie, I think, couldn't be more pertinent in this day and age, where, you know, I think with each successive generation, we seem to be becoming more and more image obsessed and reliant on the validation of others, be it through social media or just through social interactions in general. So I think this movie definitely has something to say on the sort of the real world, outside of the kind of the weirdness and the body horror that this movie has. But it's also sort of commenting, I think, on addiction, self-obsession, things like that. So I think this movie has got a lot to say. Let's talk about the VFX. I think the VFX are solid. There's lots of gooey special effects, particularly as we kind of go through the movie. It gets more and more gross, and there is some very gross out effects in this movie. You'll be reminded of things like Society, the movie Society, at times as the film goes on. And as I say, I've mentioned sort of Cronenberg as well. And then the story itself, although I definitely think this is kind of quite a bold story. It's not overly kind of complex in regards to its kind of narrative. I think it is sort of, or at least the general beats of the story are kind of easy to kind of follow, even though this movie could be regarded as avant-garde in many ways, I would say. I mean, I think that definitely has that surreal, artistic, avant-garde kind of feel to it. But I think you can still, you know, understand the general kind of beats of the story, even though I think it's not all completely narratively strong. But yeah, the general kind of beats are there. So what doesn't work for me? I mean, starting off small, there are just a few things here that I just thought were, story-wise, again, just, I don't know if I was kind of like, I'm not quite sure if I'm buying this. And like, I mean, like I said, this movie, I think, is trying to have this hyper-reality. It's not really meant to be taking place in the real world, because everything just seems, you know, a little off, a little kind of exaggerated, a little bit like that. So, you know, when we get these, this first instance where we have this sort of second body come out, I thought it was odd that they just leave the original body just like lying on the bathroom floor. I mean, surely it's a huge apartment. You know, it's surely you just put it in a bed, things like that. So there's a few instances here, like our younger version, she makes a whole secret room in like the space of a week, and she knows how to do all this kind of like building an entire room from scratch and it be perfectly hidden, things like this. There's some elements here that I just thought were a little illogical. And now, again, you can argue it's kind of this type of reality, not meant to sort of, you know, labour over each kind of thing. And I kind of get that, but at the same time, I think this movie sort of wavers between, you know, taking the subject matter seriously and certainly within the dramatic elements, but then it have these kind of sillier moments and things that I think, this doesn't really kind of make sense. And the one thing I was a little confused with, I have to say, and again, I have read nothing about this movie, was I assumed that even though there is two bodies, there's like a singular consciousness which is being sort of swapped between, you know, when one is active, the other one is effectively in like a dormant mode. but the consciousness is in whatever body is kind of active. So it was weird that there seems to be like a jealousy between the two of them. And I kind of get what they were saying here, but it didn't really. It felt, as we get towards the end of the movie, oh, there's not one consciousness. It feels like there's two consciousnesses. It's kind of like, well, that's less of a kind of sharing of the bodies, and it's more of like making a clone of yourself almost. I wasn't really quite sure about that, sort of how that kind of story element was meant to be playing out, because I felt it was a little bit contradictory in regards to what the movie's kind of trying to kind of do in regards to its narrative. And then as the film gets towards its finale, I think it goes a little bit too over the top and a bit sort of ridiculous at times. And the other thing I would say is, and again, going back to the idea here that there's two bodies kind of taking turns sharing one consciousness. You take the physical stuff aside from it, I thought the personality seems very different. I mean, like the Demi Moore version of the character just doesn't seem to talk very much. She has not a lot of dialogue, to be honest. Whilst the other one is very chatty and kind of like a lot more talkative, so they don't really feel like the same person outside of the physical differences. Maybe you could argue that the other one is the younger version is more confident because she's in a younger body, but even when she's at home and not really with anyone else. So again, I didn't really quite feel that these were the same character in a way. So, I have to say, I think this movie is very good in a lot of technical categories. I think the movie is good in acting. I think it's good in VFX. I think it's good in being quite a bold and out there kind of weird story. But to me, it wasn't quite gelling completely together. You could go. I think you could pick holes and loads of the plot holes and stuff here. How is this kind of company funded? This kind of drugs and there's a whole bunch of things to me that I just thought this movie just kind of breezes over. And maybe you don't need to kind of go into every detail here, but I think the movie just relies a little bit on convenience in some aspects. But the positives massively outweigh the negatives for me. So this does push the score up for me to a 7 out of 10. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's this kind of like, it's the best movie of 2024, some people claim, but, there you go. 7 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.